Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Raphael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Raphael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Sifu Alan, my gosh, man. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate you.
It's an honor. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were on, man, long time ago, right?
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while. It's been a while. And you've been, man, you've gotten crazier and busier and younger looking. What's going on?
Yeah, I've been keeping pretty busy. I had a few little setbacks this year, our surgeries, which slowed down things a little bit, but
Right.
starting to get ramped back up, and I'm already scheduling into 04 and 05, which is crazy.
Wow. You just told me you just came back from a 30-day adventure. So talk to us about, because some people may not remember what you did, or maybe this is the first time they're seeing you on my show. Tell us a little bit about you're Sifu, I'm a Sifu, but we're different. And that's what I love about you, is that you do the martial arts, but then you also go tactical. You do something different than even I do, which is kind of cool. So tell us a little bit about your world.
I got brought into that side of the world probably 15 years ago. I got approached by the Executive Protection Institute to solve a problem for them in their defensive tactics program. What they were doing, they were bringing in martial artists, and they would come in and teach their systems, but they weren't necessarily related specifically to what they did as protection agents. They have to follow a certain set of rules. It has to appear a certain way. Otherwise, you embarrass the client. And they were handling a lot of high and low level threats, but a lot of that information didn't address the lower level social exchanges that they're having to deal with while on camera, while on a red carpet. So I came in, I went through the school a few times, got to get involved with the work and start doing the work, which was an amazing experience, still is. And then through that, I was able to build a defensive tactics program for them from the inside out. So it was built specifically for their environment, their optics, how things would have to look and appear, regardless of the level of force. And that's what brought me into the industry. And surprisingly, that was a common problem that we were seeing in law enforcement, even some elements of the military. So it gradually started growing and growing. And today we're building programs for some of the foremost academies, individuals in the industry. And that was my last 30 days. I have 2 months a year that are always crazy, and October is one of them. And one of the reasons is because of the Executive Protection Institute. They have a 7-day school that they run. I am an instructor at the school, and I also teach the defensive tactics program that we spoke of for 3 days after that course. And then they'll do a week of shooting. And I mean, I got to stay around for that. And then we went over and spent some time with Jay Redmond. He's a ex-Navy SEAL, and he's put together a program called Overcome and Survive, which is a civilian-based program to offer similar tactics, training, shooting, survival, preparedness for disasters, defensive tactics. And I met Jason through the same industry. He was looking for a similar program for civilians that answered things that martial arts normally don't answer. Taking into consideration the force continuum, jeopardy, opportunity, and ability, when you can go to a firearm or an edged weapon, and the social buildup that happens prior to an exchange, the gift of gab, the verbal communication, which is an art into itself. He wanted to involve a lot of that. And so spent almost a week in Virginia Beach area running that program and helping teach at that program as well.
I love the verbal de-escalation, which most martial artists don't teach. Right.
Agreed. And it's if you think about it, it's a huge area of study. I mean, most fights don't start at a 20-foot range. We're in a social exchange. We're having a conversation. I may say something that you disagree with, and it starts to elevate. Social pressure is applied. They start to maybe test you out a little bit. And sometimes they do that verbally, before the exchange happens. So there's a buildup, and that verbal communication is part of that buildup. So it's important to be familiar with it, just like you would being familiar with dealing with a punch. You learn a technique for it and you train that technique. Well, there are verbal tools that you want to develop too, and you want to understand the structure of the verbal exchange. And why the predatorial mind pieces it together in that way, because they're not looking for a difficult meal necessarily. They're looking for something easy. And one of the ways they can test the waters to see if that's what they're getting into is that verbal exchange. And if you understand the elements of it in the buildup, you can approach it from a non-emotional place. I don't want to get caught up in what is being said necessarily. I just want to be able to look at it from 1,000-mile view and go, oh, I see what this guy's doing, and I need to take appropriate measures.
Right.
Yeah, which involves posturing, placing yourself at a certain distance while communicating, and that's all part of that buildup prior to contact.
Yeah. I think that's so important, and adults don't normally understand that, because maybe they've never been in an altercation, right? And all of a sudden they go, oh, I think I need to defend myself. And they go to a karate school or any type of martial arts school, and they're being taught that they have to stand tall, they have to put their posture and all this kind of stuff, but they're not taught real life skills, life self-defense, or how your body actually has to act. One of the things I teach my students is that if somebody approaches you and they want to punch you in the face, you don't go into a position like, I'm ready to fight, because you're going to have a fight, right?
Correct.
And you talked about posturing. It's like, I'm like, hey, I don't want to fight, and my hands are open, but they're keeping you at bay so that I can see how you react. And I love that you're talking about that, because traditional martial arts, if we're talking about real traditional martial arts, they were not taught to kids. They were taught to soldiers, right? And that's what martial arts was really created for. It was never created for kids. And usually kids didn't learn it unless their dad was doing something, right? So thinking about the aspects of why, and before we came on live, we were talking about why it's so important for people to learn all the different modalities of that protection.
Agreed. Yeah. And it goes deeper than that. And I love what you said is, when you go to the academy and they teach you, I want you to make this thing and I want you to stand this way. And depending on the threat in front of you, the timing of doing that could be the difference of being charged with assault or not. So, those visual elements are very important. and you can achieve the same things. And your hands came up like that. And how important and how much of an art that posturing is pre-contact. Because cameras are everywhere. Everybody, the second there's a little bit of an elevated tension in the room, they're going to come out and go, "This is going to be great on Instagram, man. I got to catch this." And depending on how far that exchange goes, that's evidence of who elevated the force first.
Right.
And even though you may be in the right, you are protecting yourself. But just because your timing is off, and before you went into a certain position or posturing, now you're in trouble. As I say, that's a very, very important thing to study, and understand that it is an art as well.
Without a doubt. One of the things that, and you think about, like, one of the things that there was a lot of hype about Messi's new bodyguard, how
Yeah.
he was protecting him so well that Messi didn't even notice that there were people trying to like reach for him and all this kind of stuff. So it's that making someone, if you're going to be a bodyguard, making them feel that comfort, right? That they're being protected. So how important is it for somebody who is officially licensed, if you will, to not only carry, but also if they're put in a position where they need to protect other people, for example, an armed officer?
As far as carrying it will vary in the industry. Sometimes your client does not allow you to carry, or insurance, because of the location you're in, especially in the entertainment industry, will not allow it. So, there's a lot that goes into determining whether you can or can't. And, you kind of have two industries that I've seen. You've got the defensive tactics industry, and then you've got the shooting industry. And they're not really, they don't mesh often. So if I go and do the training in the shooting industry, one of the key things they want to do is be able to make space, and get a superior angle and get ahead of time. And I talk about timing a lot in what I do. It's very important. But you don't always get to do that. And like we said earlier, those social exchanges, that build up, happens at a very close range. So you have to have information to deal with that elevated threat. It's a
Right.
lethal force threat at close range. And you don't always get to go to the weapon system, or it may not always be the best choice, because at that range, I may be giving a predatorial person or persons what they want. Because, as soon as you form the V, start to go for the weapon system, they know, and they're going to go for it too. And you're going to end up in a fight for it because of the range. So, you don't always get to choose. So it's important to have that information and how to deal with that at range as well, whether you're going to stay close to the threat, which sometimes you do, especially if I'm protecting a client and, I can't get them to move. I still have to be in a position to protect them. So, a lot of elements determine that. So it's important to have information in that full spectrum.
Yeah. Earlier you spoke about how you got into the industry and you went to show them your skills, if you will. And they chose you above all the other martial arts instructors that went there. And it's because of I guess your knowledge and your understanding of what they wanted, right? Because I'm sure all the different martial artists, they came in and they did their katas, if you will, right? They said, yes, for this you do this, and instead of saying what is it, because if I recall, you were listening to what they wanted so that you can give them what they want. And I think one of the things that is really cool about you is that you listen, right? You listen to what is required of you, and then also what's required of the situation, because every situation and every client is going to be different, right?
Correct. And it's important to have a diverse background, which takes investment on a martial artist or a defensive tactics instructor. It takes time, lots of time, years
Mhm.
studying, different disciplines, different systems, and pursuing them to the level where you understand them.
Right.
And understand them to the point where you can start to dissect them and put them together in different ways based on an environment. We spoke about EPI, but it immediately makes me think of Vehicle Dynamics Institute out of New Jersey. They're probably one of the top driving schools in the U.S. And their problem was defensive tactics in and around a vehicle, whether you're
Mm.
protecting yourself or protecting a client, because
Right.
they do a lot of protection training for protection agents as well. And we had to do the same thing. We had to go in and look at how they operate the vehicle. When they're training these drivers to deal with elevated levels of force in a vehicle, what do they
Mhm.
have to do? Where do they place the car? How do they drive the car? And that also they're putting a lot more safety mechanisms on vehicles now. This is
Mhm.
one of the big things I heard when I started working with them is, you can, for instance, like a Tesla, you could put a driving cone in front of that vehicle and try to drive over the driving cone. If it senses something there, it won't let you.
Mm.
So as a bad guy, that's a good thing for me. I can
Right.
walk out in front of the car, present a something that's going to influence you to get out of the vehicle, and that's a good day for me.
Mhm.
Some vehicles, if they feel impact on the front of the car, even a light one, there's a fuel shutoff system. Some of them
Mm.
have electronic shutoff systems,
Mm.
and you're not able to reset this, so it just shuts the vehicle down. And so that industry are having to deal with that from the protection perspective, which makes the car not as usable to get off the X and get
Mhm.
out of the area of threat, which is the primary thing they want to do is get themselves and the client out of there. So they're finding themselves having to get out of the vehicle and deal with the threat, which involves more hands-on training.
Mhm.
So the methodology and system had to be designed fighting in a vehicle, fighting your way out of a vehicle, moving around the vehicle to go get your client. What are the moves? What are the techniques? What are the thought patterns that I have to do against a single threat, two threats? And so you can see how there's not a lot of ready-made martial arts that answer that question.
Not at all.
You have to start from zero and actually put yourself in those scenarios, and which we did a lot of.
Mhm.
We got to speak to the professionals and the things they were seeing. These were events that these guys were running into, and they would come back to the school and go, "This happened to me,"
Mm.
and I was scared to death. But here's what happened. Here's where the guy was. This is what he did, and we took that information and started to build that methodology for BDI. And very similar to EPI, it's one of the more popular programs for that company. So same thing, having the information, the background to put your hands on the ideology, the techniques, and then the ability to piece them together around the environment, the optics of the situation, because they have to take that in consideration too, up to a certain level of force.
Mhm. Mhm. So being definitely not only intentional with how you're approaching every situation, but I guess is that situational awareness as well, right? That because every situation can be slightly different, right?
Agreed.
So you probably have to play with thousands of different scenarios, right? The difference between protecting a male and a female, I'm sure that's so different as well in comparison to even protecting a child, right?
Yep.
And then when you take on a new client and let's say they want to be protected by you or your company, do you kind of train them also so that they're at a better advantage point?
It will depend on the client. Some
No,
don't care.
I'm not talking about making them, like they're gonna defend themselves. I mean,
Right.
the things that they have to do in order for you to be able to defend them. Like, when we grab you, go with us. Don't fight us. Don't try to see what's going on. That's what I meant.
Yeah, some will have an interest. Some will not. Some clients, the way they look at it is, I pay you to protect me. Go do your job.
Mm,
So they don't care, and
right.
so that's what you have to deal with. But I have had some individuals in the entertainment industry, and they know they're going to be in a situation where you're outnumbered. There's going to be a lot of people, and they want to be there because they want to be seen
Right.
and they want to interact with their fans, their customers. So they will say, "Hey, what do I need to do? Can you tell me where do I need to be? Where do I need to stand?" And
Mhm.
there's a limited information. If this happens, this is what it's going to feel like. I don't necessarily tell them what's coming. I just this is what you're going to feel me do, and this is where we're going to go.
Right. Yeah. And then do you kind of prep them because maybe we're going to a different scenario? Do you guys go in and scope out the area? Let's say we're going to a restaurant or we're going to a red carpet event. Do you see where all the exits are? All this. So I'm saying you guys obviously you do your homework first, right? Before you go to any venue.
Correct. Usually, if we know in advance what the schedule and the location is going to be, we'll go in a day or two early to do advance work. So, if we know the specific location, yes, I'll go in, walk it. I meet the leadership and the protection guys on the location. They know who I am,
Mhm.
and they're more familiar with the location than you are, so that they can give you better information. A lot of times, tell you things that you will not see with your walkthrough,
Mm.
and that's actually one of the most important elements of the job, both professionally and as a civilian. I
Mhm.
actually teach this quite often to civilians because you've heard the term "be your own bodyguard,"
Mm.
and for me, that's a very important area of study. I refer to that often as self protection, and then you have
Mhm.
self defense, which is what we are mostly known for.
Mhm.
But that self protection element, um, you can learn that information. Uh, that if you were to hire a professional bodyguard, what would they do for you? But you could do that, a lot of it, for yourself and
Mhm.
your family, and very valuable, especially in today's world. Things are changing, so it's very good information, and it puts you ahead of the curve.
Mhm.
A lot of times, if you do your job well on the front end with that information, it saves you uh, a lot of pain, uh,
Mhm.
discomfort
Right.
on the actual event itself.
Mhm. So even if a client wanted to go to a restaurant, the placement of where they sit is probably going to be critical, correct?
Yes, yeah, generally, where are the exits?
Mhm.
How do I get in? How do I get out? I want to know where the hard rooms are. In other words, what things in this room will absorb projectiles.
Mhm.
Where am I going to be if I stay? And where am I going to be if I go?
Right.
Obviously, number one is getting out of there. As warriors, protectors, uh,
Mhm.
we kind of we're in this because we want to protect. We want to have the skill set to deal with that.
Mhm.
But the truth is, percentage wise, as far as coming out of it with the least amount of damage or uh, death, even, is to get off the X, get
Mhm.
out of there. So your primary plan is leaving with you and your client, or leaving with you and your family. And if you think about it, as we train martial arts, they didn't really teach us to leave. as we're
No.
fighting, right? We're
That's
going
right.
to go get that guy, right?
Yeah.
Because the forward pressure, right?
Mhm.
It's military science. I'm going to go put some heat on the guy.
Yeah.
But if you take that into consideration and you look at the statistics of survival, then your whole concept of fighting has to change. I'm leaving first. And
Mhm.
if the threat can apply pressure, then I'm fighting.
Mhm.
And I may be fighting while moving back. And if you think about that in martial arts, that's not necessarily the best plan. uh,
Yeah.
so we have to make those adjustments. And then, like you said, where am I at in the room? Where are the
Mhm.
exits? I may not get to choose the direction or angle I'm going into.
Mhm.
And a lot of times you have to determine this with what I call an on-the-spot advance. You walk into a room, if you don't get to visit the day before, which is common with
Mhm.
civilians, where do you want to go to eat, honey?
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
that place.
Yeah.
So developing the mental tools, the visual tools, the optics to walk into a
Mhm.
room and go, well, I know this, I know that, I know what that is there,
Mhm.
and just kind of compile that list in preparation because you never know, and
Yeah.
it has to fit into what you're doing, even at our level, the defensive tactics martial arts in.
Mm. A lot of people don't do that. They don't take that precaution because they're like, oh, this is a fine restaurant. It's a good establishment. But guess what? Things happen in nice
Yeah.
places also. One of the other things I notice is when I'm on an airplane and the announcement comes on, people don't, they're like, oh, I've heard this 1,000 times. But if a real emergency were to happen, they freak out because they didn't pay attention, because they think they know. But then all of a sudden they're like, "Where's the exit? Where I forgot, and where's my parachute or not parachute, but where's my life preserver? Right? Where's the oxygen?" So they freak out because it's not something that happens every single time they travel, and so they've heard it once or twice, and they're like, "Phew." They put their headphones on. They're not going to listen to the person or the screens that come on and start giving that safety message, and we take it for granted.
Mm.
How important is it for us not to take those little things for granted?
Well, obviously, I'm a little biased on the question. It is very important. And I've mentioned this a few times, society is kind of going in the direction where the possibility is
Mhm,
increasing, that you
mhm,
may have to deal with some chaos. So, training your nervous system to have eyes up in a situation, at least in the beginning, like we said, where's the exit?
mhm,
Listen to the safety talk, know where items are that are related to potential chaotic moments,
mhm,
and register that. Just that small habit can make a huge difference. Or having those individuals around like yourself.
yeah.
Uh, you know,
Or you.
you never. The truth is, not everybody is going to develop those skills, but fortunately, we have individuals that consider themselves protectors and warriors,
Mhm,
and they want that ready. And generally, in a chaotic moment, those are the ones that will step into the lead and take action.
yeah,
I commonly say to my guys, and a lot of the guys I train too, you're the guys that step forward when everyone else steps back.
mhm,
And that's my crowd. Whether it's a fight, a disaster situation, they're the ones that have prepared themselves in advance. They've put in the thought tools and they've done the study and gained the information so that they can be that person. Um,
mhm.
yeah.
No, without a doubt, without a doubt. So, what are your thoughts on literally every person learning to defend themselves? I mean, every single human being.
Oh, wow. I've had the opportunity to start being around a 11-year-old lately, and as a family member,
Right.
and have conversations, and he gets spends a lot of time on the phone. So he'll say, "Hey, Alan, you want to do something? Let's play a video game." And my response is usually, "Let's go tie a knot. I'm going to show you how to do some rappelling. This is what
Mhm.
diving is. Here's jujitsu."
Mhm.
Um, I think that is a life skill that everyone should have. It's one of the fundamental pillars that should be studied. And I
Mhm.
know, it's for me. I use the term often, spectrum of violence, and that word has an edge for a lot of people. To me, it's just a tool.
Mhm.
Bad guys use it, and that's what gives it that edge. But you have good guys in the room as well that use it, and they're the ones that stop the bad guys. So if you look at it that way, if you're ever placed in that situation, knowing at least some fundamental basics
Mhm.
is very important, because it can make the difference between surviving a situation or not, or receiving damage that might stay with you for the rest of your life or not,
Mhm.
or protecting a family member, and having the ability and the knowledge when you see that situation happening to step in and handle it appropriately. So I
Mhm.
think it is imperative, honestly,
Yeah.
to learn it, at least the basic fundamentals.
Yeah, totally agree,
Yeah.
1,000%. I've had federal agents that I've trained. One of them used to fly all over the place, and he was one of the guys. He looks like a regular guy, but he was a federal agent on an airplane. That was his job. He flew everywhere. Then I've also had CIA and FBI agents bring their kids to me because they realize the importance of their children learning real self-defense compared to just playing soccer, right? Because playing soccer
Right.
is great. I've played soccer. I've played so many different sports, and I think two things that everyone in the world should know is how to move in case of a situation and how to swim, because the world has more water than land.
Right.
So, right? So if you don't know how to swim, man, you may drown, right? So I would I would say those are the two key ingredients that people should know, even and not necessarily that you have to go and train forever and ever. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would love for people to train forever and ever because we probably would have more empathy and we probably would not go out and do all these crazy things against one another if we know, hey, they all know how to defend themselves. So what am I even going to go try to fight them for? Unless I want to fight, right?
Agreed. It levels the playing field a little bit.
It does.
And one of the amazing things about combative science, regardless of the system, is the environment.
Mm,
There's so many other life skills that are taught due to that physical training and the physical exchange between two humans. You learn a lot about yourself, and you learn a lot about how you handle situations, chaos, whether it is a fight or something life throws at you later.
mm,
Getting on the mat, regardless of your particular flavor, helps you to develop that willpower. It toughens you mentally, emotionally, physically,
mm,
and helps you prepare in advance, which is what we're talking about, for those moments in life that you weren't expecting,
mm,
and hopefully due to that wisdom and knowledge that can come out of those um, moments of preparation,
mhm.
help you navigate it better, and
Yeah,
come out of it in a better place.
absolutely. One of the things that drives me a little nuts is when you see somebody teaching stuff that would never work in real life situations. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. So, one of the things that anybody who comes to train with me, I say, hey, listen, everything I teach you works. But if it doesn't work for you, you don't need to use it. Only use what works for you, and you got to get good at it, because what may work for me because of my body type, or because I've trained for so long, it's not going to work for you, and it's not going to work for you right away. You have to train, and you talked about it, years and years and years. So usually I get this a lot. Do you have a class for teenage girls who are about to leave for high school? And I'm like, yeah, how many sessions? Oh, just one session. I'm like, really? What do you think that's going to do? I said, because whatever I teach them, they're going to walk out the door and know nothing. So I said, if you do 6 sessions, I can get them at least to learn one technique they can walk away with, at least one, right? Whether it's a choke, a grab, a wrist, whatever, but at least if they can walk away with one thing. But one session for an hour and a half, and they come, and they're young girls, and they're just going to giggle, and they don't take it seriously because they think, because they're going to an Ivy League school, that nothing is going to happen to them. Meanwhile, we all know that things happen in colleges all the time.
Yep. Yeah, I've heard that request a few times myself.
It drives me nuts, right?
Yeah. Usually one of the mental tools I will use in the discussion, and I use it a lot in program design too, is I call it the combat blueprint. And, we'll say in a physical exchange or the encounter, there's certain primal elements that are going to happen. And a primal element is something that a human being will do, trained or untrained. And it's like throwing a punch. You don't have to be trained to do that. You can watch videos on YouTube of closed circuit exchanges, and they're just figuring it out. It might not look good at all, but they will do it. And, it's like pummeling or standing grappling. It happens. And we see it in boxing, and it's not part of boxing necessarily, but we put referees in rings to stop it. Edged weaponry, whether it's a piece of glass or any edged weapon, human beings will recognize it, pick it up and use it. Never had a day of training. And projectile weaponry. And you need to have some decent answers in each one of those primal environments. Something. And like you said, it might not be what I choose because of how I'm built, my age, the damage I've received over the years might not allow me to do certain things anymore. But you need to kind of find what will work for you in that environment. And at the very least, have an answer for each one of those. And, there's some martial arts systems that don't even do that. They don't offer those things. And it's important because the bad guy isn't training martial arts. He's not saying I'm just going to go get that guy and do a double leg takedown on him. He'll see.
Right.
And he's looking at you and picking that victim, and he's going to put you outside of your element. If you look like you can handle one thing, he's going to pick something else, because he doesn't want difficulty. He wants an easy meal.
Yeah, and I love grappling because it goes from one exchange to another, and a lot of stand-up martial artists, they badmouth grappling, right? They'll say, well, not everything ends up in the ground, but what if it does? Why shouldn't you be ready for it, right? You do grappling, you teach hand to hand, you teach what happens if you're standing, what happens if you're against the wall, what happens if the wall now becomes the ground. So I believe, and the way I teach is that you have to be multiversed, if you will, right?
Agreed.
You can't just think one way, because if you try this technique and it doesn't work, what do? Okay, I'm done. And you can't do that, right? And that's why I love grappling, because if this choke didn't work, maybe I'm gonna try a different one. I'll go to this move. I'll maneuver. I'll change it up. But also, what a lot of martial arts don't do is they don't shoot for consequences for the difference for different body types, and it's all basically the same move. There's no angles changed, or everything has to be straight. And you talked earlier about how you're retreating as you're doing your thing, because yeah, you know what, a real life situation, somebody who doesn't know anything can just cut your throat, and it's like by accident, right? They
Yep.
just happen to have something in their hand, and they did that to you, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, you know, instead of having your hands up to begin with, which would have prevented it. So it's all the little things that I know you teach, but it's a lot of what I think is not being taught in so many martial arts schools across the country, and that worries me, because a lot of people say I'm a black belt. And I've seen black belts, and I go, okay, fight out of this paper bag, because it's like they can't even. I'm like, what are you doing? You can't even defend your own life, but you've wasted time, right? Maybe not wasted, but because you trained your body like you talked about. But when there's no practical, real life situations going on where people are not being, I guess, a simulation, right? A pilot has to fly a simulator before he actually flies a plane. A lot of them do, right? I was fortunate. I was able to fly an F-16 simulator for about an hour, which is crazy because most people don't even get that much time on a government issued flight simulator. But I was fortunate. I had somebody who actually designed the lasers that are looking into a pilot's, a fighter pilot, and wherever their eyes go, guns go,
That's cool.
which was, it was amazing. And can I tell you, I just crashed like 5,000 times within that time. But so for me, I think that fighting has to be more realistic when we're training, instead of, maybe I'm talking about point sparring. Maybe that's what I'm talking about.
Wow, there's a lot there. Yeah,
I know.
started out on the ground. You know, I agree. One of the questions when I get in that conversation is, you know, have you ever fallen down? You know, coach, have you ever fell down when you didn't want to? You ever had that experience?
Oof.
I have. And so, you know, I'll generally ask after that, were you in a fight when it happened? Because, you know, gravity is not just a good idea, it's the law. Yeah, chances are you will end up there. And it's not always one individual, it's two. Sometimes it's three. And, you know, you are in a situation where you have to do the best that you can do. And you'll trip over something, you'll run into a car. A common situation, we create a lot of pretty crazy scenarios at the academy, but we'll have guys fight in booths, at tables and chairs, like you said, against walls, between two cars. The first thing that comes to my mind is several times I've been drug out of a booth, and my plan was to stand up and fight, and ended up on the ground or down on one knee. You know, one of the times I can remember being gently placed on the hood of a car, and they started, you know, knocking on the door. And because of my experience on the ground and knowing what the mechanics of that position is and how to produce destructive force, I knew what to do. You know, and that's not on the ground, it's on the hood of a car.
Right.
My plan wasn't to be there, but there was a couple of them, and that's where I ended up. And I had to do the best with what I had. So yes, it's not always classic grappling. Sometimes your body ends up in a horizontal position in some crazy places. So it's good to know, at least understand mobility and how to produce mechanical destructive force or power, because that's going to then give you the ability to defend yourself. And in the second part of the conversation, I agree. And it's important to place yourself in those environments, whether it is a grappling environment, ground fighting environment, dog boxing, which is out of position fighting, and test at the level that you can still gain wisdom. I think a lot of people fear it because, you've got this guy, he's put all this time in, and he's just going to tidal wave you. But you have to have good training partners, good training environment, and you can say, hey, look, I'm uncomfortable dialing this up to a 6. Can we bump it back to a 4 so that I can try it and then gain wisdom, figure out what I need to fix and fix it? And if you've got a good training environment and a good set of training partners, yeah, we can do that. And if you're comfortable doing that and you have an environment that can turn that up, 6 months later, 8 months later, it will actually help you educate yourself and gain the skills, the attributes needed to survive in those chaotic moments. Unfortunately, you don't see that often. Or those environments aren't controlled at that level. But I say it because if you're listening to this and you hear that and you go, well, that's really cool. I would try it if I could find an environment like that. At least now you know what to go look for. When you walk in, you talk to the guy running the place, you can ask those questions. What kind of place do you do? How do you handle this? And determine, because, to go back to what we were saying even before that, it is an important life skill. It's a fundamental thing that everybody should have something in. And I think we avoid it a lot as human beings because of fear.
Yeah. John Burrell chimed in a little bit. And when we consider the things that we do as martial artists, right? For me, when I'm going back to like 1980 something, I was a bouncer for 5 years. And I was the only bouncer, and I worked in many different nightclubs in New York City and Queens and Long Island, one in Long Island. And I was the only bouncer that the police never came looking for, because I never hurt the patrons who were trying to kill me. Right. And that's, I think that, and I'm not the biggest guy. I'm only 6'1". And why did the nightclubs decide to hire me? Is because I showed them how I can handle the situations, how I can keep their patrons safe. Right. And then I got lucky. I was able to be a bodyguard for a couple of people here and there. And when we consider that you and I have trained in martial arts for a very long time, we're now talking to people who may have never trained in martial arts. Is it too late to look for a place that may teach martial arts? A lot of people are saying, well, I need to go learn Krav Maga. I need to go learn Jiu-Jitsu. I need to learn karate. And they start naming things instead of saying, what is it that I can physically do? Right? Because my physicality may not be that of a 18-year-old or even a 40-year-old. Maybe I'm 60 and I want to go and be able to still protect myself and my family. How or what should I start doing? Do you, and I know you do, because you don't only train law enforcement, you also train civilians. So if I went to your website, sifualanbaker.com, can I sign up for one of your camps?
Yeah, we actually have events often all over the United States. A lot of them will be hosted by other individuals, and they'll have me come in and teach. And then this year, we're actually starting to host them ourselves.
Nice.
We've been getting a lot of requests for the different information that's not necessarily connected to the martial arts. It's more of what we're talking about, the designed programs civilian based, and that type of information. So we are in the process now of scheduling those for next year. We've also got a couple of video archives on there that if you can't make it, you can get introduced to the concepts and the information. At the very least, it's best to train and find a place. And to answer the question that you had, it's never too late. Sometimes we feel that it's too late because, wow, I'm 53 years old. I've torn all the ligaments in my shoulder. I've got a surgery. I tore them in my elbow, my knee. You listen to this guy. That's me. Still going. You just have to do it intelligently. Like we said earlier, take the time to find those individuals that are going to be like-minded, and they'll take care of you. And the human body has to be brought up slowly. And depending on where it is, injury, age, mileage, in wherever you are, that's okay. Don't expect to be doing what that 20-year-old is doing. That's okay. You are where you are. And the big thing is to get moving forward. Even if it's a slow, consistent pace, that's okay. And just finding an environment that allows that.
Yeah. One of the things that I teach kids and the parents are listening to when I teach it to them, I teach them the 4 principles of self-defense. First, they have to put their hands up, right, and say, stop it, right? If somebody pushes them, even calls them a name, pulls their hair, spits at them, whatever it is. And the first thing is for them to say the word stop it and put their hands so they're pushing away, right? Create a distance. And then they have to tell them their feelings. I don't like it, right? And then after that, they have to say, don't do it again, right? But all this time, they're keeping their hands up and say, I don't like it. Don't do it again. They're pointing at the person. And then I teach them that they have to go tell an adult. But then that also formulates to an adult when somebody comes, because listen, by looking at me, you can't tell I've been doing martial arts since I was 10, right? You can't tell I've had 48 years of martial arts experience. You just see me as maybe I look fit, right? Because I am fit. But they don't know what I know, right? Just like looking at you, I can't tell that you can kill me in a second. I can't tell. But so a lot of people, even at my age, have tried bullying me. And so I tell them, hey, stop right there. I said, I don't like what you're saying to me. So even as adults, we have to still relay that message that I don't like what's going on. And we need to give them. So the things I tell the kids is you first have to give them instructions to the bully, right? You have to tell them, stop it. Then you have to tell them your feelings. And then you have to give them more instructions because they didn't hear you the first time. And you have to let them know not to do it again. Because if you don't tell them not to do it again, they will continue doing it. And then the reason we tell is so that they stop the bully, because maybe an adult will be able to help that bully not bully someone else. Because if they don't say anything, they're quiet. Now that bully goes and bullies another person, another person, another person. And the same thing happens as adults, that we may be in a working environment and even your manager may be the bully, right? And I've seen that. And people leave certain jobs because of the way they're treated. And sometimes they're bullied. So I think self-defense comes so many different ways of how we look at it. What is your take on you're not running a martial arts school, but you are. Tell us what that means to you.
On the verbal side, I agree with the point, and it kind of goes back to something we were saying a little earlier, is the art of communication and negotiation. And if you think about it, it's not taught in school. A lot of times it is a self-educated topic, which I commonly tell individuals, and I call it the Warrior Academy. You're in charge of your education. The system doesn't necessarily care at that level. And, there are certain things that, as we mentioned earlier, violence as a tool that you should know. And that is one of the pillars. But one of the additional pillars is going to be the ability to have those verbal skills. And that we mentioned earlier, not necessarily in the exchange. We learn them in the exchange. But, negotiating at work, having that communication with the neighbor, and the ability to get your point across. Now, in a altercation, it's a little more difficult because the stress levels come up. It's a little more chaotic, and you might go, "Well, is this really happening to me? Did that guy really say that? Well, surely he's not serious. Is he joking or is he real?" So yeah, being able to apply that communication and negotiation while in a chaotic moment is part of that skill set. And if you think about it, one of the most perfect places to learn it, if it's available, is on the academy floor. And we learn that physical communication all the time. We put our hands on each other. We play, we move, we throw, we punch. But you have to have that art verbally as well, and be able to play it and develop it. And like we said, maybe it's not necessarily being taught in our current system, but if you are teaching a child or a young man, for me, it's one of the things on the list. Now, he may learn it in our games, playing Gift of Gab, but he may apply it later in negotiating a position at work. So such an important skill.
Yeah. I can see how it would be so important for so many school owners to even reach out to you and say, "Hey, we need you to come over." So I just made your calendar a little bit heavier because I think a lot of school owners should do what you're saying. For example, the shirt I'm wearing, right? It says, what does it say, right? What does it say? Where is it? It's over here, right? The vanishing flame, knowledge never dies, right? And this is based on real fighting that happened, and these children at the age of 11 had tattoos all the way down their thighs, because this was the way in Burma, this is the way they became warriors, right?
Right.
They had to fight, they had to know.
Rite
And
of
also,
passage.
one of the things about their kickboxing, whatever, their head in the old days was part of the weapon. And you don't see that in MMA. You don't see them using their head, but your head's a weapon. So there's all this training that we do, but we forget that we need to use our head, maybe not to hit somebody, but to use it to think outside the box sometimes, right?
Agreed. Both physically and thinking. I totally agree. Burmese Bondo. I'm very familiar with it.
Yeah.
And, the art of giraffe wrestling, which you see in a lot of catch wrestling, it is not only a tool that's not used, it is a very good tool that is used. Sometimes it could be almost an art unto itself. And I've found it a lot lately in the last 5 years when we're dealing with a lot of close quarter firearm pummeling and grappling. And we mentioned that a little earlier. If a firearm comes online, if a bladed weapon comes online, your hands are going to be on it, whether it's mine or yours.
Right.
We want to take charge of that. And that ties the hands up and takes the use of them away at close range. So you have to switch over and take a look at those other tools that are available. And the head, the shoulders are very powerful tools. And then outside of the physical, yes, the ability to think, to have a mental decision-making tool, which I always reference in the beginning. This is a lecture I give quite often, the OODA loop, as a good fundamental structure to start developing those tools. How to think. What is your thought process, and does it work in chaos, like we mentioned earlier? You know, I'm thinking I'm having this exchange. I'm negotiating with my boss. I walk outside the building. Somebody doesn't like what I said, and now it's a physical exchange.
Mm.
So we have to have the ability to implement those thought tools under chaos. And you know, what are the drills for that? How to develop it? We could talk about that for another hour.
Yes, absolutely. So developing, I guess, action plan, right? Quickness, how to even get out of a situation, both verbally or even before in this a situation escalates.
Mhm.
Because if you're walking down the block and you see something's not right, maybe don't walk down the block. A lot of people go, it doesn't feel right, and they keep walking. They keep walking.
Mm.
They're like, I think, and they keep going. They keep going into it instead of saying, hey, you know what? I don't like what I'm seeing. Let me go the other way. Let me do a detour. Yes, it may take me an extra 5-10 minutes to get out of the way. Quick story. I was in Mexico, and I'm leaving, and I have a 4 a.m. flight. So it must have been maybe 3:15 in the morning. And I'm with my girlfriend at the time. And we get in the cab, and it's pitch black, and the guy starts to drive. Most people, what do? They're exhausted, they're tired, they kind of fall asleep until they get to the airport. Not me. So I'm looking, and I see another car coming, and it flashes. And so I see he flashes them, and he starts to slow down. And I lean over, and I whisper in his ear. And I said it in Spanish because I'm Colombian, even though I don't look it. I said, if you value your life, you do not slow down anymore. You speed up, you don't stop. And I was like right in his ear. And he kind of like, okay. He moved on because I said, if you value your life, because I knew if he stopped, we were going to get robbed or whatnot, right? Because there was the signal back and forth. But it's that awareness, right? That we should be attentive no matter what, especially if we're in a foreign place.
I totally agree. You know, one level of it is awareness, training your optics to be online, because you know that's part of the decision making process is being able to see what is going on around you, process it, and then you move on to making a decision. I think even prior to that too is I call it long range posturing, and it's in relation to what your daily habits are. There is a study that's been out there for a while, the Morrison-Stein study, and you know they recorded a video of people just walking. I think it might have been down a hallway or on a sidewalk, and then they took it into a prison system and put it in front of guys that were in there for murder, rape, that type of thing, and they said, out of all these people walking by on the screen, who would you get? Who's the victim? And they would pick them out in under 5 seconds.
Wow.
Then they took it into the next room and asked the next guy. And they started to see that these guys were picking out the same individuals and doing it in the same amount of time. And after doing this, they went back and said to those guys, what are you seeing? And they compiled a list of the tempo of the body, the posture, the length of the stride, the swinging of the arms, the position of the head, how aware were their optics. Now, these guys are predators. They may not think the same way we do,
Right.
but these are the guys that mean to do harm. They mean to turn you into a victim. And it's such a great list of information of what they see. Now, what they're seeing is our physical habits that we use every day. We may not have taken the time to choose how we hold ourselves, how we walk, the tempo of the body. Much like you were eyes up, head was on a swivel, you were online and you picked it up. So, you know, that's an important thing to consider at long range. Now, this is even prior to you becoming aware that there is a predatorial mind out there that could be zeroing in on you. And then your optics. Did I see? Am I training myself to look and register what those pre-attack indicators are, whether it is a flashing of lights, a look from a guy on a sidewalk. You know, you may notice that he changes his bearings and starts coming in your direction.
Right.
You know, and that is an element of stalking that predators do. And, you know, generally there's going to be some sort of surveillance prior to a physical encounter where they actually come into the critical distance. They get close enough to you that it's going to matter. What does that surveillance look like? You know, so not only the elements that they are seeing, but I want to be able to train those list of elements on my end too. I want to see that the lights flashed. I want to be aware enough to know that this might mean something. I want to see them change direction on the sidewalk. The predatorial glance, you know, they're sizing you up. What do those things look like so I can be aware of them? You know, we mentioned having building the verbal art, the gift of gab earlier. This is all prior to being in the range of communication. And if you think, if we can become masterful with that level of it, how much you would avoid on the front end.
Oof.
And then on top of that, taking into consideration the advanced work that we were discussing, going into the room, knowing more about the restaurant, the location, the mall, where am I parking? You know, you adjust those thought patterns to where you're taking that into consideration. You're cutting stuff off way ahead of time. This also will force the predator to show you his cards, because if I'm aware and he recognizes that I'm aware, and I'm in a process of de-escalating even prior to contact or communication, if his intent is to still do something, he's going to show me exactly what his intent is. So it forces him to show his cards on the way in, which most of them don't like to do.
No, not at all.
Much like the gentleman you whispered into his ear, right? He was showing his cards by slowing down, and you recognized it right away, and, you know, had a little verbal exchange and got your point across. That was good communication.
Oh, yeah. I make, plus if I said it in English, you know, it might not have come across as well. But, you know, understanding that sometimes, even if you go to a different country, you should also kind of learn the language a little bit, the important words. Right? Besides where's the bathroom and I'm hungry, you should learn words that may include when they talk about you, right? Because if somebody's communicating and they all of a sudden they mention that guy, you should know how they're going to say that, right? So it's all the little things I think that we need to do when we're not in our environment to be prepared. And it's not about walking around being terrified or scared or have anxiety about going somewhere new. It should be just, it's so, for me and for you, it's so ingrained in us that we don't even think about it. We just do it, right? But somebody new coming in, they're going to have to take a little bit of time to develop that, if you will, right?
Yeah, and you know, one is gaining the information, and the process of ingraining it into the body, the mind, the nervous system. It does take a little time, but definitely, you know, worth it. Especially if you're in a position where you may be the protector for your circle or your family. You know, and I take that very seriously. You know, for the people that are close to me and that I spend a lot of time with, I look at myself as the individual that's responsible for that. It's part of who I am. So it's important for me to put that in and be aware of it, be prepared.
Yeah, I think it was Evan Vestman that I spoke with, and he said he knew you. He's a tactical guy also as well. He said he did some training with you many years ago, but he spoke highly of you, of course, just like I do.
Oh, wow.
So, yes, you know, I got to tell you, I love how you've taken all your training and your you're not just holding it for you. You're freely giving it to people, and you're empowering people so they can have a better life. And it's fun doing it, I'm sure, but it's also you're creating such a great service that I think that more people in the world need, right? And because it's not, listen, for those people who got kidnapped in Israel, right, and the Gaza Strip, would they have been kidnapped if they had a little inkling? Probably yes, but maybe they could have avoided it. Maybe, right? So it's having that edge, I believe, that we all need.
Agreed. And then, entering that moment and then recognizing what's going on and going, what do I do?
Mhm.
Or, oh, I remember my training. This is what I'm going to do.
Mhm.
For me, I would prefer to be in that position of, oh, I've had some training in this. I spoke to this person, got this knowledge, and so maybe I'll take this action. At least have something that I'll try.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah, yeah. I got to tell you, Sifu Alan, it's been an honor and a pleasure, my friend. I look forward to not only staying more in touch than we did last time,
Oh
because
yeah,
I know you're
we're
crazy
trying
busy.
though.
We
Happy
are
Friday.
trying. You know what? I gotta give you kudos. Out of all the people who have ever been on my show, you send me a happy Friday, buddy, every Friday. And you, for that, that's huge. It doesn't matter where in the world you are, you're still, hey, happy Friday, coach. That's incredible. So why do you do such a thing? And how many people do you reach out? Oh my gosh. I know you know a million people. So I am honored that you do that. And I tell everybody about you that you do that, because that you light
Yeah,
up my
thank you.
every Friday. Every Friday you light me up.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in communication
Mhm.
and keeping contact with individuals that make a difference. It's like what you just said before that is basically making that effort to make a change in the world. I mean, what is your legacy going to be?
Mhm.
When I'm gone, what's left? And
Yeah.
I hope that it is a legacy of change and uh, helping someone in some way.
Mhm.
And I have a relation to uh, warriors. Those, like we said earlier, those individuals that when chaos happens, their natural reaction isn't to step back, it's to step
Mhm.
forward.
Mhm.
And a lot of times those are the guys, the single individuals that in that moment will make a huge difference. It will save lives, change lives. It doesn't necessarily has to be violence.
Right.
There's so many opportunities that life gives you to make a difference and to lead by example.
Mhm.
And you don't say it, you do it, and then the people see that you're doing it and you're doing it consistently, and they go, man, that's cool.
Yeah.
I want to make a change. Maybe I'll be more prepared, or maybe I'll communicate better with my family, uh, whatever it was. So that's the legacy I'm trying to lean into.
I
And
love
part
it.
of that is keeping a connection
Yeah.
with like-minded individuals, people in the world that are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're both a warrior mindset doesn't hurt.
It does not. It does not. Absolutely. Well, thank you again for taking the time today. And I know that you probably have to go unpack your past 30 days. But thank you. Thank you for that, for spending time with me. Do me a favor, just hang on a minute. We're just going to say goodbye to everybody. So, everybody, do me a favor, follow Sifu Alan Baker, sifualanbaker.com. Do yourself a favor. This man is totally not only a warrior, but his heart. You can see his heart. He cares. He wants you to be amazing, because you are. You are amazing, right? And if you like the show, let us know. Also, if you think that this was worthwhile, which I believe it was, share it with your friends and family and your loved ones, because I think that everyone can benefit from everything that we talked about today. So thank you, everybody, for being here with us.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.